Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Sarah Goodwin, and I administer the National Safe and Healthy Housing Coalition. We are a broad voluntary coalition of over 650 members, including 400 organizations, working to improve housing conditions nationwide through education and outreach to key national stakeholders and federal public decision makers. And we also host a series of webinars throughout the year featuring healthy housing topics and experts. Before we get to hear from our presenters today, I have just a couple of logistical pieces to go over. First, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available afterwards if you want to revisit it or share with colleagues. And we will also be taking questions after both of our presentations are done. So if you have a question for our presenters, please type them into the question box throughout the presentations, and then we will get to answer them at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ian, our first presenter. Ian Round is a reporter who recently moved to Nashville, where he's freelancing for the Daily Memphian and the Tennessee Lookout. He covered local politics and schools for Baltimore Brew after earning a Master of Journalism from the University of Maryland. Ian is presenting on Code Red, Baltimore's Climate Divide, an investigative journalism collaboration on which he was the lead reporter. The team used innovative methods in detailing living conditions and health outcomes in the urban heat island of East Baltimore. Code Red, published in fall 2019, won numerous awards competing against the biggest names in journalism. So Ian, I'm going to hand the controls over to you.
All right, thanks. Hey, everybody.
I'm muted.
I am very excited to be here to tell me about, or to tell you all about Code Red in 2019. So let's get going. I was the lead on the streets reporter. I am clicking. Is it going? It appears not to be going for the next slide. Oh, there it is. Okay. Thank you. So I was the lead on the streets reporter on this project, looking at the urban heat island effect in Baltimore City and the consequences of unrelenting heat on the health of Baltimoreans. As you can see, it was called Code Red. And we reported a bunch of stories with different angles. There was, the general overview of what a heat island is. There was a story specifically about health impacts. There was one about the impact of tree cover. And then there was one about solutions. We also, we partnered with National Public Radio, and one of my classmates who was interning for them had a couple stories run on All Things Considered. So we got some national play, and the project was syndicated around the world. Dozens of people were involved, data analysts, designers, photographers, reporters, editors, and in order to head off my editors killing me, I should mention that I was part of the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism and Capital News Service, both of which are housed at UMD's Merrill College of Journalism. Anyway, here is what an urban heat island is. You can read that if you care to, but I personally don't really like to read on PowerPoints, just like to listen. So in Baltimore and in many other cities, there are blocks upon blocks of row houses. They're tightly packed together, mostly brick, stone, or form stone, and they share walls and roofs. There are basically no trees in some neighborhoods, and it can get up to 10 degrees hotter in urban heat islands than ones with more tree cover, and the air quality is much worse, as you can imagine. Here in this image, you can see one of my colleagues used sort of a temperature sensing, a gun-looking type thing, and so they pointed at the street where you can see at the bottom it was 110 degrees. It was really hot in row houses or on the surface of row houses without tree cover. 117 degrees and 112 you can see here, and it was way cooler just a couple feet away, like 10 steps away, where there was a tree. So that can illustrate the impact of uh, of tree cover and of not having it. So in a heat island, everything from the brick walls to the asphalt streets, and especially the black tar roofs, absorb heat. And in neighborhoods with trees, the shade helps keep houses and people cool. This image here shows two of the most disparate neighborhoods in terms of basically everything you can measure in a society. The tree cover is the one that's reflected here, but Roland Park, one of Baltimore's wealthiest and whitest neighborhoods. Most of the fancy private schools are located there, and it is covered with trees. Broadway East in East Baltimore, no trees basically. Filled with vacant row houses. It is a basically all black neighborhood, and it is very many people are very poor. So row houses absorb the afternoon sun and they release it back into the neighborhood in the evening. It doesn't cool off, and you're dripping sweat in the dark. This is an image of a little graphic video that one of my colleagues produced. This is showing heat coming into walls, roofs, and asphalt streets. And in the bottom left here, those houses have white roofs which reflect heat and keep houses cooler. On the bottom right, those are three of the most important factors for keeping homes cool and keeping human bodies healthy. That middle one, AC units, certainly a point of debate since air conditioning is a big contributor to climate change. But it is indisputable that in heat islands, people need to have some relief from the heat. Anyway, on the left here is Tammy Jackson. She was one of my sources. She lives in a house that gets hotter on the inside in the summer. I don't believe there are any trees on her block, and she has way more health issues than anyone should have to deal with. On the right is State Delegate Robin Lewis, who represents the area and is working on solutions to climate change and the heat island effect. So I'm gonna scroll back, not quite ready for redlining yet. So I'm lucky enough, and many of you all are too, I imagine, just by the coincidence of our births, not to live in the environment that Tammy lives in. So when I visited her and my other sources in their unair conditioned homes, I quickly soaked through my shirts. I got dizzy, headachy, exhausted, and irritable. I couldn't think clearly, and I needed to sit for a few minutes in my car with the AC blasting before I was comfortable driving. It was really bad. In just a few minutes, I saw just how much worse my quality of life would be if I lived in this environment all the time. So you may not be shocked to learn the hottest parts of Baltimore are those that were redlined decades ago. In East Baltimore, particularly McElderry Park, which is where Tammy lives, and Broadway East, which is not far away, neighborhoods I just showed you. Those are the hottest parts of the city, and I'm gonna circle that. I believe you can see that, the mouse moving. That's the hottest part of the city. That is where Black people couldn't get home loans. and faced discriminatory housing practices. Baltimore had some of the most evil and innovative and rigorous and detailed, down to the block segregation rules in the country, and those patterns still exist today. So while redlining no longer exists technically by the letter of the law, we still see its consequences. The hottest neighborhoods are mostly poor and Black, where residents couldn't get those home loans. And the coolest, greenest neighborhoods have much more wealth, and they are more white. People in heat islands have worse lives, I think it's safe to say. Higher rates of poverty, asthma, COPD, hypertension, and other heart and lung conditions. Shorter lives on average, worse healthcare, and more emergency room trips. So in Baltimore, this pattern of segregation is known as the white L and the black butterfly. I'm gonna, with my mouse, draw the shape of an L. This is a term coined by the academic activist, Dr. Lawrence Brown. He at least used to teach at Morgan State in Baltimore, and I'm not sure if he's still there. I know he's publishing a book soon on investment in the white L versus the black butterfly. It's called the butterfly because mostly this circle here and this circle here are pretty much all Black, and they sort of look like the wings of a butterfly. So here are some graphics that I don't have the coding skills to do, but they pretty vividly illustrate the heat island effect. Can take a quick look at those. And here's another one. Most of these are showing to, varying extents this white L pattern, especially the poverty one and the unemployment one. Since people in urban heat islands in Baltimore, like Tammy, get around more often on buses or bikes or on foot, they own fewer cars and have fewer Amazon packages shipped. They contribute much less to climate change than people with money in these suburbs. But they feel climate change much more acutely. Our data team compiled mountains of data from various sources to establish these patterns. So I can answer some more questions about the data team's work, but since that wasn't my job, I will not belabor that too much. My role in the project was to be a people person, to find people living in the East Baltimore heat island and tell their stories, to bring our data team's work to life. That involved walking around, just canvassing like a political volunteer, just talking to people. My headquarters became this really nice Lutheran church in the McElderry Park neighborhood. They let me eat my lunch in their basement, and we got to know each other over the course of the summer. So in our project, we used innovative methods and later won awards for them. I can't take credit for the innovation myself. That started long before I came to UMD and was far above my pay grade. So here's the innovation. We used temperature sensors, which you can see on the left here. to record what it was like in people's houses. We housed the sensors in little 3D printed boxes, as you can see here, in the home of Michael Thomas and Alberta Wilkerson, who live in Broadway East, and they were two of my sources. So what the temperature sensors allowed us to do was to, we could say exactly how hot it was in people's houses without air conditioning, so that we didn't just have to rely on people saying, you know, just sure is hot, huh? That's subjective. And with the data, we had factual information about how hot it was, and we proved that it was much hotter on the inside frequently, especially during the July 2019 heat wave. So it took a lot of slow trust building to convince people to accept these sensors in their homes, and that was my primary job. These are all Black neighborhoods, and I am white. These neighborhoods are overstudied and underserved, and justifiably lack patience in people like me. Other people like me are grad students at Johns Hopkins, and they study these neighborhoods all the time. It's the heat island is in the Johns Hopkins Medical Center's backyard, and they're overstudied, and you know, nothing, you know, seems to happen to materially improve their lives. So here's some data from 3 of our houses. These were in rooms without AC. So during the heat wave, it hit 99 degrees. With humidity, it felt much hotter. And so we, during that heat wave, we were deployed, and you can see how the temperature sensors recorded heat and humidity, collecting data that showed that it was worse on the inside than the outside, while outside it was basically unbearable. So what do we do about it? Any single local level solution will be too little when so many enormous forces are at play, often incentivizing making these problems worse, and you know, covering our eyes and ears. So those forces include, of course, climate change, segregation, public health, land use, crime, education, all of these. Here's another image of Robin Lewis and a quote from her. As a journalist, I come at this from a different angle from advocates like you and Delegate Lewis. I report on what exactly is wrong and how people are affected. I detail potential solutions, what has worked or not in other places. I'm not so old school, both sidesy, that I give equal weight to climate deniers. And I'm perfectly comfortable saying we urgently need to do a lot to curb climate change and to create healthy neighborhoods for people like Tammy and Michael and Alberta and Stephanie Pingley. That said, it's not my role to lobby leaders for specific individual solutions, nor how much government should spend on them. And it's definitely not my job to promote the work of any specific advocacy group. So it is my job to educate people, mostly people less informed than yourselves on what is happening, but I'm not responsible for making it happen. That's another thing I can talk about forever if you'd like to ask me about it. Pictured here is the backyard of the church I mentioned a minute ago. This used to be a block of vacant row houses. They were blighted and abandoned for years. When suburbanization swept the nation, people left places like this, which used to be filled with fairly stable middle class communities, supported mostly by factory jobs. There are lots of little steel mills now abandoned and other factory type places around here, and people that live here, those jobs disappeared and a lot of the people left. So these neighborhoods, they're dense with houses, but they're not dense with people. There are astronomical rates of vacancy caused by, as I said, suburbanization and a million other factors, leaving Black people with the short end of the stick. And here what they did, they knocked down the row houses and planted a garden. So here, the church is the steward of the whole area. Under these trees, there's a shaded bench, one of the few shaded benches, in a probably quarter-mile radius. A nice little yard for people to walk their dogs. They have rain gardens here. They produce food here. They teach kids about gardening and, less didactically, just, get kids outside, around plants and get their hands dirty. So what they did was they turned this really struggling block, which was contributing to the heat island effect, into an oasis. So this has become a really good little community area. Lots of people come here. So it's clear that these neighborhoods need more trees and green spaces like the amazing Fort Street Garden, which would allow heat to dissipate at night and consequently provide more relief inside and outside of houses. There have been some efforts to knock down vacants and replace them with green space. But the issue of ownership of the houses and a bunch of other factors, which I'm not quite educated enough to detail, make it really difficult to make any progress on getting more people or more trees in the area. This is a picture of Natalie Cohen. She was the environmental educator at the church. She ran the summer camp, and here she's teaching kids how to harvest kale. I believe she works for some environmental nonprofit now. So to eliminate the heat island effect, neighborhoods need efforts like these, gardening and tree planting and et cetera, and education. And they need more than just trees and more than just crops. They need more people of mixed incomes, as well as land use rules and development that deprioritize cars, which you all know is one of the greatest contributors to climate change. And of course, we need action rather than, 100-page PDF plans that no one will read. So what if instead of driving a half hour to your downtown office from the suburbs, you lived in a walkable, bikeable urban neighborhood and could take a bus 15 minutes to the office? What would it take to get suburban families, and I don't just mean young childless professionals like myself, to live in the city? With all these vacant houses, there's certainly room for both more people and more trees. Both are necessary for healthy neighborhoods and healthy housing, in order for people like Tammy Jackson and Stephanie Pingley and Michael Thomas to breathe clean air and sleep in a house cool enough for their bodies to recharge. Next, Sarah's gonna introduce Will Driscoll, who's gonna talk about one of those solutions, which I mentioned really briefly here, which is cool white,
Unmuted.
which reflect rather than absorb heat. And thank you for listening. I'm happy to take any questions after Will's presentation.
Thank you, Ian. So as a reminder to the audience, if you have questions, you can put them in the question box and we'll get to them after our next presenter. Our next presenter is William Driscoll. Will catalyzed a $1 million study by Johns Hopkins University researchers of the health impacts of excess heat from hot flat roofs for the families who live in Baltimore row houses. He then founded White Roofs for Public Health to promote low-cost measures that cities can take to advance white roof coating of row houses and apartment buildings and to help protect families' health. Will is presenting on the extent of the hot roof problem, how excess heat is associated with poor sleep, how poor sleep has been linked to heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and depression, and how a city may promote white roof coating either by tapping proposed federal funds for weatherization or promote it by requiring landlords to coat roofs white. So, Will, you should have control, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ian.
Muted.
And good afternoon, everyone. One other point is that the Baltimore Sun published my op-ed on white roof coating and how cities can require landlords to apply white roof coating. And the link to that op-ed is in this presentation. So I will make the case today that hot flat roofs impair health and can be fixed with white roof coating. I maintain that this is a public health issue that has a public health solution. New knowledge produced in just the last 3 years points to this conclusion. My goals are to educate, to empower anyone interested to engage in advocacy, and I invite your comments, not just your questions. You may submit a comment through the chat function. This is the starting point, and we'll return to this slide later. Black roofs get very hot, white roofs are much cooler. Hot flat roofs, where are they? First, what types of housing? Row houses, apartment buildings, 2 flats in Chicago, triple deckers in New England. And where are they? They're found in many older cities. Ian spoke about the Code Red project in Baltimore, which focused on the McElderry Park neighborhood. Here's a satellite view from Google Maps of 3 blocks of that neighborhood. We see many dark roofs. Dark roofs absorb summer heat and radiate that heat into the house. We see a few gray roofs, which also, which have only half the cooling power of white roofs. White roofs keep families cooler. White roofs also counteract the urban heat island effect. Row houses are also common in Philadelphia and several other cities. Philadelphia has hundreds of thousands of row houses. My mother grew up in the 3rd house from the right, shown here. In these houses, the top floor has 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. You see the front bedroom on the top floor in this photo. There's a back bedroom, which also has windows, and the middle bedroom has no window. If it did, you could open it up and climb into the house next door. So it has no window. My uncle, who had the middle bedroom in this house, says it was hot in the summer, and that was in the 1940s, before climate change. And you see some air conditioner units in the windows. Here's a view of North Philadelphia. We see mostly black and gray roofs. Here's a view of South Philadelphia. Lots of gray roofs, and again, those have only half the cooling power of white roofs. Here's a view of Harlem in New York City. We see black roofed apartment buildings at the top center. The Harlem Heat Project found the highest indoor temperatures in public housing. That project was a precursor to Baltimore's Code Red project. Here's Chicago's South Side, one view, and there's a mix of roof colors. Here's Richmond, a view in Virginia. The white roofs really jump out at you in this photo. They appear to have very high reflectivity, perhaps close to 100%. Later, I have a slide regarding how to optimize reflectivity over time. And again, these images are from Google Maps satellite view. That's a good resource to see the extent of the hot roof problem in a city. So here is for comparison, this is a luxury development of townhouses. That's the newer name for row houses in Doral, Florida, near Miami. And the developer calls these luxury units. So all the roofs here are white. And incidentally, in this development, the exterior walls are also white. So here we see an example of that in Baltimore. The house at the bottom center has a white front. Note that white roofs provide more cooling power than white exterior walls because in the summer months, a dark roof gets hotter than a home's brick wall. The roof has a darker color and receives more direct sunlight as the sun is high in the sky. So here's the logic chain of the rest of my presentation to make the case that I am making. Flat black roofs get very hot. That heat is radiated to families living directly below the flat roof. Excess heat is associated with poor sleep. Over time, poor sleep is associated with serious disease, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, the Alzheimer's version, stroke, depression. So points 3 and 4 show the effect regarding the effect of heat on sleep and the effect of poor sleep on health represent new knowledge largely just from the last 3 years. So then next, white roof coating is a proven technical solution, and some policy options have a near zero cost to cities. President-elect Biden has proposed support for weatherization that could be used for white roof coating, and I propose that cities may require landlords to apply white roof coating. That's the Baltimore Sun op-ed I mentioned. So, okay, flat black roofs get very hot. Here's the slide we saw before. The black roof, in both cases, in both images, the air temperature is 90 degrees. The black roof reaches 150 degrees. The white roof is 55 degrees cooler. The Department of Energy, which produced this information, their focus was to reduce air conditioning costs in buildings. They weren't thinking at that time about residential buildings and the health of families who live there. But now, with new knowledge, it's time for us to think about this. Also, if you want to see some source data, the article shown at the bottom provides that. That heat is radiated to families living directly below the flat roof. Heat from the roof is that gets to 150 degrees is radiated to the top floor ceiling and then to the residence immediately below. The effect is like a bedroom ceiling radiator in a row house or a whole home ceiling radiator for an apartment on the top floor of an apartment building. Unfortunately, we don't have data on top floor ceiling temperatures. The closest approximation is data on air temperature at the ceiling. In Philadelphia, during a 2002 heat wave, in 11 row houses with a flat black asphalt roof, the highest air temperature at the bedroom ceiling ranged from 87 to 102, even though 6 of the 11 houses had air conditioning. So maybe the highest bedroom ceiling temperature also ranged from 87 to 102. That's the best guess that I have at this point. What would be helpful would be measurements of top floor ceiling temperatures made with an infrared temperature reader. And we'll see a slide on this later. So what about air conditioning? I'd like to invite you to join me in a thought experiment about radiant heat. Imagine you're walking on a city street on a hot and humid summer day. Would you prefer to walk on the sunny side or the shady side? And remember, it's hot and humid. We all know that the shady side is cooler. The air temperature is the same on both sides, but on the sunny side, you also feel the sun's radiant heat. So when you want to be cooler, you don't want radiant heat. A hot ceiling below a hot flat roof warms residents, even if they have air conditioning. That's what radiant heat does. Steve Luxton, the executive director of Philadelphia's Energy Coordinating Agency, has said that hot flat roofs expose families to excess heat 5 months per year, from May through September. Here, a quick timeout to share a public health professor's advice that policymakers need data. Dr. Megan Latshaw, associate scientist at Johns Hopkins University, advised me that to persuade a city council member to consider a new public health policy, you need to provide data. In that spirit, the next sections present data. So, excess heat is associated with poor sleep. This is, I intend to demonstrate that. We know from Baltimore's Code Red project that excess heat is uncomfortable. Is it also bad for your health? Again, a quick thought experiment on how heat affects sleep. Have you yourself ever experienced difficulty sleeping when it's too hot? Maybe living below a hot flat roof, maybe during a summertime power outage when the air conditioning wasn't working, maybe in a home without air conditioning. If so, you have experienced how heat impairs sleep. If not, you may be able to ask someone who has experienced this. We need to acknowledge, before exploring the effects of heat on sleep, that excess heat can kill. This was demonstrated in a New England Journal of Medicine study. Of 700 excess deaths during a 1995 Chicago heat wave, people living on the top floor of a building were 4.7 times more likely to die. As we saw in the satellite image, Chicago has flat roofs on many residential buildings. The heat in a top floor residence from a hot flat roof combined with high indoor air temperatures could account for that higher rate of excess deaths. Now, here's a landmark study showing that excess heat impairs sleep. The 2017 study, published in Science Advances, matched up 2 data sets. First, data on self-reported sleep quality from about 800,000 people over a 10-year period. And second, nighttime temperature data. The researchers reported that increases in nighttime temperatures amplify self-reported nights of insufficient sleep. We observed the largest effects during the summer and among both lower income and elderly respondents. So those are the populations who would be helped the most by white roof coating. And I want to note the publication Science Advances. I had never heard of it before, but from what I've learned, I can tell it's a first-rate journal, and that is, it's published by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. It was only recently launched in 2015, and it's peer-reviewed and it's open access, which means it's free to bring up this article and read it. And there's a news story there as well that introduced me to this study. Next topic. Over time, poor sleep is associated with disease. And again, the diseases are shown here. So the next slides, I'll first present validation and then evidence. So validation, Johns Hopkins University has launched a $1 million study of heat, sleep, and health. Dr. Adam Spira, a sleep researcher at the university's School of Public Health, has said, first, it's well known that high temperatures negatively affect sleep quality. So that's his starting point. Perhaps largely based on that 2017 Science Advances study. And second, he said, insufficient sleep is associated with an increased risk of motor vehicle accidents, depression, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, and mortality. He is co-leading the $1 million study from Johns Hopkins University, and the city of Baltimore is a research partner. And here, again, this study is described in my Baltimore Sun op-ed. So the same Science Advances study I just described also summarized research on the links between poor sleep and poor health. The article gives citations to studies documenting these findings, that poor sleep is linked with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, worse mood, depression, suicidality, and also that it harms cognitive performance. This would be a good article to share with a policymaker who is open to reading a journal article. It's not that long, as this article makes both key points. Excess heat impairs sleep. That was the earlier slide I presented from this study. And poor sleep impairs health, as shown in this slide. So while the 2017 Science Advances study may be the best single resource, new findings keep coming out. For example, one from last year, broken sleep predicts hardened blood vessels, which talked about how it may raise the risk of stroke, and also, a debilitating brain injury. It's a brain attack, like a heart attack is for the heart. The book Why We Sleep by UC Berkeley neuroscience professor Matthew Walker presents 26 pages of additional research findings on the health effects of poor sleep. Next, white roof coating is a proven technical solution. The validation here are the white roof programs in many cities. Philadelphia's Energy Coordinating Agency has been coating row house roofs white for many years. New York City has coated a quarter of flat roof buildings white. A Baltimore city agency coats up to 50 row house roofs white per year. Chicago and Philadelphia have passed laws requiring cool roofs on new construction, though these laws do not affect existing roofs. And the evidence that they don't affect existing roofs is the images we saw from the Google Maps satellite views of Philadelphia and Chicago, showing many roofs are still black or gray. Louisville, Kentucky offered rebates for cool roofs in 2017. And globally, many cities are pursuing cool roofs and other cool surfaces in cities. So, white roof technology options. The best option, because it is effective and low cost, is probably white elastomeric coating, a rubbery coating, not paint, that expands and contracts with the roof. Philadelphia's Energy Coordinating Agency applies a prime coat and then a top coat when they do white roof coating. And the cost is $1,200 per row house. And ECA generally first replaces an old asphalt roof with a modified bitumen roof, which costs $3,000. Otherwise, if you're not replacing the roof, the tasks are to clean and patch the existing roof, then apply a prime coat and a top coat. Some roofs may be suitable for a white single-ply roof membrane, such as TPO or EPDM. And a side benefit, white roof coating increases a roof's longevity. So this is my favorite part and my motivation for this webinar, white roof policy options at near zero cost. Option 1, President-elect Biden's proposed weatherization program. The plan includes weatherizing 2 million homes. And I maintain that weatherize should mean keeping out excess heat in the summer, as well as keeping out cold in the winter. Under a weatherization program, all flat-roofed residences could be eligible. So an advocacy option here for those interested is to ask city council members to contact the Biden administration directly or through their city's congressional delegation to ask that white roof coating be included in Biden's weatherization plan. And another option is my proposal to require landlords to reduce excess heat from top floor ceilings. Landlords are already required to provide habitable rental units. For example, landlords must provide a working heater. As another precedent, several cities and counties have enacted laws requiring landlords to provide working air conditioning. So a city could require landlords to protect families from excess heat, such as by applying white roof coating. So an advocacy option here is to reach out to city council members to advocate for this public health solution. If a city enacted a white roof public health law, what about enforcement? Well, for any landlord who did not comply, the city would need to coat the roof white and bill the landlord through the property tax bill. Then, if any landlord did not pay their property tax bill, the city is legally authorized to possess the property, sell it, and give the landlord the net proceeds. Technically, a law might require landlords to limit top floor ceiling temperatures, and might provide that white roof coating was a safe harbor means of compliance. It would be better for a city to enforce such a law proactively. If instead a city only responded to tenant complaints, a landlord might retaliate against tenants who complained. This is a ray of hope, in my view. At least one city council member backs cool roofs without waiting for new construction. Baltimore City Councilman Ryan Dorsey says that cool roofs are a human rights issue. We need more city council members to recognize this public health issue and enact a public health policy in their respective cities to protect families living under hot roofs. A public health law for rental units, that is, that applies to landlords, requires them to apply white roof coating or otherwise reduce top floor ceiling temperatures. Such a public health law could be matched with assistance for owner-occupiers of row houses. Once a city starts coating rental row house roofs white as needed and billing the landlords, the city could also offer white roof coating to families who own the row house in which they live for the same cost as for landlords. Separately, a city could educate owner-occupiers of row houses and support lower-cost group purchasing of white roof coating, for example, for all interested homeowners in a given block. That could achieve economies of scale and result in a lower cost per house due to the efficiency of coating several roofs at once. The next few slides are bonus slides. You may download the recorded presentation later from nchh.org, and pause the recording on any slide that interests you. So here's a question, an open question that involves doing some research. This research would require an infrared temperature reader, and the ceiling temperature could be measured before and after white roof coating. So if you know of another city agency or nonprofit doing white roof coating, please let me know and I will pitch this research idea to them. And open question number 2, identifying the best roof coating practice to ensure that a white roof stays white. And certainly this will start by, the best practice starts by choosing a highly reflective white coating as rated by the Cool Roof Rating Council. But there are other factors as well that could be documented by whoever may know the best practices. This is a view. Here's what the Cool Roof ratings from the Cool Roof Rating Council look like. You can come back to this slide on the recording. And I can field either or both of the next 2 questions in the Q&A period if they are the most pressing questions for those of you on this webinar. And the first is, what about cooling centers? And or anyone could pause the recording later to see my responses. The second one is, what about air conditioning? So I really hope to hear your initial reaction to this issue. Are hot roofs a problem? Should the problem be fixed? Can it be fixed? Please consider providing your comment in the chat function so Sarah Goodwin may share it. And back to you, Sarah.
Unmuted.
Thanks, Will. That was a lot of great information. So we have the rest of the time here for questions. So I wanted to start off with a question about weatherization. Will, you had mentioned weatherization as one of your potential policy options, so I wanted to ask some follow-up questions about if you're aware of any groups that have combined weatherization with cool roofs or done cool roofs as part of weatherization, and if not, if you have other thoughts about how those two could go together, or any other kind of housing needs or healthy housing issues that might be pair well with cool roofs as something cities could try to accomplish simultaneously.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I have. And before I get to that answer, I want to emphasize that I see cool roof coating as weatherization itself. It's weatherizing the building for summer heat and protecting families from summer heat, excess heat. So the roof on any of these buildings, if it's not insulated already, can be insulated. I know that Philadelphia's Energy Coordinating Agency often or perhaps always does that.
Great. The next question is, have Baltimore or other cities modified their codes to set maximum indoor temperature? The commenter is saying that in one city they have minimum indoor temperatures, but they may not have maximum. So do you know of any cities that have a required maximum indoor temperature?
I know of several cities and counties, Montgomery County, Maryland, 1 or 2 cities in Texas, and a couple of others that require landlords to provide working air conditioning. And, you know, if that's, but I think it's just to provide working air conditioning, not to, but then if it's central air conditioning, that's a good point. You know, what temperature may not be exceeded in the summertime, but that's a completely separate issue from what I've explored about cities and counties requiring working air conditioning.
Okay, a question for Ian. I was struck by the part of your presentation where you discussed these communities being kind of underserved and overstudied. And so I was curious if you had any kind of takeaways from your conversations with residents or from your experience in the Code Red project about kind of both how to make those connections with residents when when you're trying to encourage participation in the kind of research that you were doing and how you were able to kind of build those relationships? And then also, what do interventions or services need to do to be successful in actually providing meaningful change to those communities that, as you said, are often underserved and overstudied?
Okay, so that's a, a lot of questions in one. I guess I'll start by by talking about like relationship building. So we went really slowly. We would just introduce ourselves and have brief conversations with people, and you know, maybe get their phone number or say like, are you going to be back at the food pantry next week? Let's chat then. So we didn't, you know, come out sensors ablazing. We just, you know, tried to get people acclimated to us and listen to them. We tried to seek out people who fit the data, which is to say, people in the heat island without air conditioning and with health conditions made worse by the heat. So after a little introductory conversation, it was like toward the end of the second interview that we brought up the issue of sensors. So, I mean, there was a huge funnel, like the number of people we talked to, subtract from that the number of people who told us to go away in maybe not so kind terms, people who initially talked to us and then lost interest, people who maybe didn't lose interest, but we were unable to reach them, you know, after we initially did, or didn't answer their phone. And so, I mean, it was tough. Like, we didn't, you know, just, you know, walk up to people and say, we're going to put this sensor in your house. I tried to include a bit of, you know, humor in it. Like the sensors weren't connected to the internet. We had to come back every couple weeks to check it and download the data on a little SD card. So like when I was trying to butter people up, I would say like, you know, this isn't, you know, some Amazon Alexa. We're not, you know, recording you. Jeff Bezos is not on the other side. And that generally charmed people. And I mean, what's really tough is that like a lot of the people who study the neighborhoods have something to offer, you know, like, you know, in exchange for participating in our study, you can get $50 or you can get like a bag of produce, you know, and as journalists, we can't offer that. We can just offer the opportunity to have your story told and have this issue brought into public conscience. So, I mean, I don't know if we certainly didn't eliminate the problem of skepticism, and I will admit that I maintained some skepticism of our own project, which I thought was, you know, more oriented towards the people who are giving awards and you know, awards for journalism, so that our project might allow UMD to be ranked higher than it was to improve people's lives. So we can't put AC units in people's houses, but what we can do is like hold legislators' feet to the fire. And then what was the other part of that?
Yeah, well, that was a lot of great information. I'm actually noticing that we're basically at time. So my other part of the question was kind of any thoughts that you have on implementing actual change in these communities and kind of what the programs may need to be successful. But we are about at time, so if you maybe have a super brief answer, and then we can get to like one more question and then close it out.
Okay, I feel like it's pretty, there's some low-hanging fruit. I think that includes what Will's talking about with white roofs. The city could throw some money at providing air conditioning. The things that are much tougher include, zoning changes and completely reorienting the development model and increasing public investment in the black butterfly rather than in the white L. There's the local issues of planting trees and cooling people's houses down, but then it's in great part caused by climate change. So that's something that's a all hands on deck issue that everybody needs to tackle at all levels of government and in the private sector.
Great, thank you. So we got a bunch more comments. So some of these I'll have the presenters maybe follow up over email with people as well. But I just wanted to kind of give a brief summary of some of the comments we heard, because I think we had a nice kind of discussion in the comment box. We had some comments that regarding incentives for weatherization, there were some clean energy regs that gave double credits for carbon reduction from such programs, which seems potentially relevant when you're talking about a program like this that has both a carbon benefit as well as a health benefit. And then we also got a comment asking about the appetite or capacity for code enforcement in Baltimore and other places, kind of building off of what Will was saying about enforcement and needing to have enforcement to ensure that these houses and cool roofs are actually implemented. And then finally, there was a comment about that in California, cool roofs can be combined with weatherization, and that something to consider might be combining cool roofs and rooftop solar, which is a potentially interesting idea, I think. So that's a very brief summary of some of the comments that we got. And again, I'll share the comments with the presenters so that we can do some follow-up over email and continue the conversation that way. But thanks again to everyone for attending and participating. And thanks to both of our presenters for a really interesting conversation today.
You're welcome, Sarah. Thanks for the opportunity.
As I said, the recording will be available afterwards, and everyone who attended will get a copy of the recording to review, revisit, spend more time with, and so on. So thanks again for attending, and we'll hope to see everyone at future webinars. Have a good rest of your afternoon.